Hello everybody, welcome to my final thoughts on Nanobot Battle Arena. Now Nanobot Battle Arena comes with everything you see on the table right here for $30, which includes almost 100 cards. There's going to be 15 tiles for each one of those strains, plus these little extra little cards that have no gameplay effects. There's a little bit of extra little eye candy. Tells you a little bit about your strain, and it's just a picture of your strain, which is pretty cool. Plus the game comes with a rulebook, which does a really good job of explaining how to play the game. Now granted, it's not an overly complex game, and I did only show you the sample rules for the basic rules, and there's more advanced rules, but they're not much harder than what you saw in the basic gameplay. Basically, the difference between the advanced and the basic rules is in the advanced rules, instead of playing a tile and then playing a card, in the advanced rules, you're going to play a card, play 2 of your nanobots, then play 2 more cards and refill your hand. So not too much different, but it does offer a lot more strategic gameplay. Now the components for $30 are really good quality. The cards are really good. These are nice, thick cards. They're going to last you a heck of a long time. They got a very good snap to them, so they're not going to fall apart on you anytime soon. The cardboard tokens are for the nanobots are done good. They're thick, decent quality. They're not thin paper, so they're really nice. Basically everything you're getting here is pretty standard stuff, but it's good quality, especially for a $30 price tag. What I really do like about the game, though, is especially when you have a game like this that requires you to recognize colors, what they did is they went one step further and they actually added symbols to all these different nanobots, which makes it very, very colorblind friendly, which is not something you see in a lot of games these days that they really should do more often. For example, all the burn cards, while they're orange and they match all the infernos, which are orange, and which matches all the orange tokens or the orange nanobots, if you look really, really closely on these cards, you're going to see that there's a symbol that looks like a little fire, little flame, little lantern, candle, whatever you want to say. Looks like a little flame, which happens to match this symbol, which happens to be a little flame, which happens to match this symbol on the front of your nanobot, which also happens to be a little flame. That also happens to go for the ghost also, which has a little smiley face, and a little smiley face, which is an awesome touch. It means that this game is very much 100% colorblind friendly, which is really good on a game that does require you to have a little bit of color recognition, especially when you have a couple of these nanobots on the board and you're trying to figure out which nanobots line up. Now granted, there's pictures, and all the pictures for all the different nanobots are different. I just want to give extra kudos to Derpy Games for taking the time to add symbology, which can help people with color vision issues. Definitely a good plus. Overall though, for $30 you're getting a pretty decent deal here. It's not a great deal, but it's not a terrible deal. For $30 you're getting a lot of cards, good quality, a lot of tokens, good quality, and a decent rulebook, and it all fits in this nice, very small compact box, which can fit basically in a very small bag, which makes this game very, very portable, which is cool if you want to take it on a camping trips or anything along those lines. Every time I do a review for a board game, it's always important for me to take a few minutes to discuss family friendliness and player count. We all know there's those board games out there that while they may be great at certain player counts, they seem to fall apart at other player counts. And also family friendliness is important to me because, you know, we all want to play games with our family. It's always nice to find those games that we can play with our families. Nanobot Battle Arena as a family game is really, really funny because the front of the box lists that this is a game for ages 14 and up. And I have to say that is absolutely 100% ridiculous. This is actually a fantastic family game for anybody ages 5 and up for many, many reasons. First of all, the biggest thing is that this game is really good for early readers because there's no requirement to know how to read, because it's all color friendly and it's also all symbol friendly, which pretty much means that if you can recognize colors, and again they do the symbols for people who can't recognize the color or can't recognize colors at all, but as long as you can memorize that gray is always petrify, this swirly pinkish purple is always surge, the orange is always fire, there's no reason at all that you have to be a reader to play this game, which means that this game can be played by the younger family members. Add on to that the fact that this game has take that mechanics, which is great for the younger kids because it allows them to catch up to the adults, especially when you have some kids who are working together, especially a very devious 6-year-old and a 9-year-old who like to tag team up on dad, which they love to do. They can definitely do it, and this game has to take that kind of mechanics where even good strategy can be defeated by somebody just playing some cards and getting some lucky card draws, which is again really cool for the younger players. Although I want to emphasize that the that mechanics are more of a mitigator versus a dominant thing, because still a very good strategy is going to help you win this game versus somebody just getting lucky card draws, although lucky card draws can make up for a really bad strategy. On top of that, the game is very, very fast playing. As a 3-player game without somebody yammering on about why they're playing the cards and playing strategies, if you watch the video where I show you the sample gameplay, it runs longer than the game ever really should because I took the time to explain to you exactly what I was doing. With a 3-player game, I can get a full 3-player game of this with my 2 sons, me and my 2 boys. We can play a complete game of Nanobot Battle Arena in 20 minutes or less, which just really ranks up there as a family-friendly game because sometimes the little ones don't like to sit still very long. And a 20-minute game where they stand a chance versus their dad is definitely an awesome game for the family. Nanobot Battle Arena also lists as a game for 2 to 8 players, and the game does have some mechanics where multiple sets can be combined, so you can play with either 15, 30, 45, or even 60 nanobots, which allows you to adjust the strategy and the gameplay for the game, which is a definite really cool and a very nice plus. And the reason why that's very important and a very nice plus is because when you start adding more players to this game, just using the very, very basic rules, this game can become extremely, extremely chaotic and very, very random because this game has a lot of take that mechanics where it's very easy for players to start dogpiling another player, and it's going to become much more dominant the more players you add to Nanobot Battle Arena. Having said that, if you only own 1 copy of Nanobot Battle Arena and you just want to play with 15 nanobots per player, I would definitely recommend not playing with more than 4 players. Actually, I prefer this game. I think it's better as a 3-player game or 2-player game with 1 set. Now, if you start adding a second set, and what I did is I don't own a second set, so what it is, I played around by 1 player having 2 different colors and just saying they're all the same color. So, for example, if I was the echidna, I had the yellow and the green. I said these were also echidnas, which has allowed me to play around with it. And it is a way you can play around with it if you want to try the advanced rules, which does reduce it to a 4-player game if you do that, but it does let you play those more advanced rules. So you can see the game can be much more strategic than what you see just using basic rules. Now, if you're to use a second set, or just use that little idea I said where each player uses 2 sets of nanobots and pretends they're 1 solid color, however you want to do it. Once you add in a second set, I think 3 to 5 players for Nanobot Battle Arena is still a really good player count. But again, even with a second set, once you start getting past 5 players, the game again starts getting a little bit too chaotic for my taste, and the take-back mechanics and the fact that you start dogpiling other players makes it more of a chaotic game and less of a strategic game. So basically, if you want this game to be more strategic, keep your player count down. If you want the higher amounts of chaos and you enjoy things like playing Cosmic Encounter or Lifeboat or other games like that where the chaos is there, and you really don't care because everybody's just coming and just ganging up on everybody, the game plays fine with higher player counts. Nanobot Battle Arena is a deceptively simple game with some pretty interesting tactical gameplay to it. We're talking pretty much gateway level of difficulty, but the gameplay is very, very quick, especially with 2 players. We're looking at probably much a 15-minute game or less with 2 players, and if you're looking about a 4-player game, you're looking about 30 minutes. 8-player game, well, I wouldn't personally recommend it because I think it's too chaotic. You're looking about 45 minutes or less. The game does have some pretty clever back and forth gameplay. It never actually feels like the game is lost until the very end thanks to some clever gameplay. You can play cards that are going to help you, whether they're going to be defensive cards, or they're going to be cards that are going to mess up your opponents, or they're going to be cards that will help you, or anything along those lines. The card play does make the game just a little bit more interesting. The card powers add the right amount of direct player interaction, variable uses, and at least up to 5 players, they make the game enjoyable and still strategic without feeling too overly chaotic. And as I mentioned before, the components for the game are actually really good quality. The cards themselves are really good card stock. These are cards that are going to last a long time. I've shuffled these cards. I've had sticky-fingered 6-year-olds playing with this game with the cards and playing with the tiles. The game is going to stand up, and that's really, really good, especially if this is a game you want to play with the younger ones, because low price point, easy game to teach the young ones, so it's definitely a positive to have good quality components that the young ones can play with without you having to worry about them breaking anything, because it's simple cardboard tiles, simple cards, very simple stuff, very hardy and durable. It's going to last a long time. I also like how the different nanobots play ever so slightly differently just because of the bonuses they get with their cards. Now, of course, your gameplay is going to change depending on what cards you get in your hand, but they do have the additional power of being more powerful when they're using their cards, and the addition of being more defensive and protect themselves when players decide to use those cards against them, which is definitely a nice bonus. Now when you're playing the game, you're going to notice that some of these nanobots work better at certain player counts just because of the way their powers are. For example, Inferno with a 2-player game can be fun, but Inferno with a 4-player game using burn level 3, burn level 4 can be outright devastating to other players. Whereas Ghost, when you have a 2-player game playing with Ghost, it's great. You can aggravate your opponents to no end by using your Ghost powers and causing other players to blink all over the board and mess up their strategies and totally ruin their day, which makes Ghost a really fun game, a really fun nanobot to play with a 2-player account. But you'll notice your strategies will change when you're playing the Ghost player as more players get started getting added to the game. So for example, a 5-player game, Ghost is going to play much differently than he would be playing in a 2-player game. And then you have the Relic player who can, in a 2-player game, can turtle along and come around and just win with Bulldog tenacity. But the Relic player is really, really nice because the Relic player seems to play really well at all player counts because it's a very defensive kind of nanobot, and you get your Petrify level 4 out there and you manage to petrify 4 nanobots in a row, you know that they're going to be pretty much immune to the other players' cards unless they start playing Petrifies against you, which are going to be weak against you because it's your natural affinity. And then finally you have your Echidna player. Now your Echidna player, you have to watch another Echidna player who happens to be playing very quietly and very silently, because an Echidna player who happens to only have 5 nanobots left in their cache can pretty much end the game at any time if you're not very careful, because they're going to simply start their turn by playing one of their nanobots, and then they're going to throw out a grow level 3, which is allow them to add 4 nanobots to the board, and they're going to turn their 2 chain all the way into a 7 chain very, very quickly. So you have to watch out for a nanobot player playing Echidna and playing very quietly, sitting off to the side. Now, it's not an impossible strategy to beat. There's other ways to beat it. You can always have, in multiplayer games, you can have a couple of people playing freezes on the nanobot player, or I'm sorry, on the Echidna player, making sure they don't have access to their grow cards. So it is possible to slow them down, but the Echidna player and various player accounts can be very, very devious just by holding on to one grow level 3 till the end of the game. Now, there are some negatives to Nanobot Battle Arena, but most of these negatives are going to seem pretty much like a broken record to anybody who enjoys games like Cosmic Encounter, games like Lifeboat, games that have take that mechanics where it's up to the players to mitigate somebody getting too far ahead. Games like Cosmic Encounter where you see somebody playing the Filch. What's going to happen if somebody plays the Filch? Well, you just painted a bullseye target on your forehead because everybody's going to be coming after you. That's basically how games like this, like Nanobot Arena, can play, and it can be a negative for some players. For example, playing the Echidna player is basically painting a bullseye on your head if you're playing a multiplayer game. If you're playing Echidna, you're going to notice that there's a lot of burns that just happen to be being played against you, making your life a little bit difficult. People will be playing blink cards on you, trying to make your life that much more difficult, because they know that most likely as an Echidna player, you're holding on to a grow card, if you manage to get one, till the end of the game so you can throw something out. So it's one of those games where it can be possible to start dogpiling on one player, especially if you look like you're starting to win. Then it means that somebody's going to start playing a lot of cards on you to make sure that you're not going to be the winner. I would have really liked to have seen something like maybe some sample things, for example, counter cards, where you can stop players from playing cards against you. And the game does kind of hint that there's going to be an expansion, or at least they have the plans for the expansions that's going to add more card types to the game. What I've been playing around with my friends when I've been playing this game is the game does come with a couple blank cards. And what we've been doing is we've been shuffling these blank cards into the deck. And if you happen to have one of these blank cards in your hand, we've been allowing you to play them as a counter card. So if somebody happens to play a burn 2 against you, and you happen to have one of these counter cards, you can play it off turn and stop this burn card from affecting you. And since there's only a very, very few of these cards that come with the game, these blank cards, they're so rare that you encounter, but it's common enough that you can at least use as a bluffing mechanic against your opponents. And so far that's been working out for us, and we kind of enjoy the fact that you can do that. And it seems to have laid off a little bit on the dogpiling that can be led to in this game. Additionally, the card draw in the game can be a little bit chaotic and a little bit random, and sometimes it can pick on you to an extreme. For example, if you happen to be playing a Inferno player who happens to have a handful of the burn cards, and every round you're seeing them playing a lot of these burn cards, you're going to start seeing your nanobots pretty much destroyed. And if you don't have any petrifies to protect yourself, or if you're not putting yourselves in proper formations to at least stop them from consistently burning you over and over and over again, there's really not much you can do. So that's kind of the luck of the draw, the way the cards come out, and sometimes it can be a negative for the game. The cool thing though is that there are strategies that can help you if stuff like that starts to happen. For example, in the example of the burn, if you start putting all your nanobots in a perfect circle so that they form a circle so there's no beginning or no end to the chain, you actually become immune to burn cards. So you have to play strategically and start figuring out what kind of opponents you're playing against and see what kind of strategies you need to win the game. It's not a foregone conclusion when you get a bad card draw against you. It just can make your life a little bit more difficult. Additionally, the game can feel a little bit more strategic when you use the more advanced rules where each player gets 30 nanobots or 45 nanobots. But again, that does require extra copies of the game. That does raise the price of the game though. You're looking at $30 for each copy of the game. If you wanted 2 copies of the game to play with the more advanced rules, you're looking at $60 for this game. Additionally, some of the nanobots and some of the nanobot powers seem like they are geared more towards the advanced rules, especially the freeze powers, where if you get freeze in the basic rules, it's not quite as crippling, but when you get freezes played against you in the advanced rules, where players can play multiple cards against you, you can see your entire hand frozen, meaning you have no access to any cards at all. So some of the nanobots can be more powerful with the advanced rules and a little bit weaker with the basic rules for the game. Of course, this does lead to one more negative. If you want 2 copies of the game, you are looking at spending $60, which can seem a little bit on the higher side for a tile game with a whole bunch of cards. What I really hope is that Derpy Games either looks towards a advanced set where they have 30 of each one of these nanobots plus a deck of cards in a slightly bigger box and charges $45 for it. Or what they do is they offer an expansion option where you can just spend like $15 approximately and just get a box full of just the nanobots, because you don't need 2 sets of cards unless you start using the 45 nanobot rules. 1 deck of cards is more than enough to play the advanced rules with each player having access to 30 nanobots. Hopefully that's something they consider, because it is something I think would be perfect, because $45 actually seems like a really good price to pay to play this game with the advanced rules. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the game can just get way too chaotic when you get too many players playing the game. There's nothing to stop a player from dogpiling against another player, and the more players you have, the easier it is to dogpile on another player. If you happen to have a very lucky turn where you get out a couple nanobots and you get a string of maybe 7 or 8 nanobots because you're starting to play really well, you can watch your entire chain of 7 nanobots get destroyed as your opponents play card after card after card after card on you, and by the time it comes back to your turn, you have no nanobots left on the table because the game is just chaotic enough and dogpiling enough for the other players to completely obliterate any strategy you might have had. The bottom line for Nanobot Battle Arena though is that if you're looking for a quick playing, 20-minute or less strategy game that offers strategy, replay, and variety of different player accounts for under $30, then check out Nanobot Battle Arena. This has been another off-the-shelf board game review looking at Nanobot Battle Arena by Derpy Games. Thanks for watching.